All right, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am an avid herpetologist, and today we're doing an updated deck list for Machinedramon in the EX3 format. I've had a couple of requests on videos, as well as some awesome new people who have joined my Discord looking to get started on the Machinedramon archetype. I've been having some really good discussions with you guys, so I figured I would go ahead and post an updated deck list that I used in this last week's locals. One of the big reasons I haven't posted an updated deck list for Machinedramon since EX3 dropped is the deck keeps changing. That's one of the issues Machinedramon has always had and always will have, is it's not a solved deck. So getting a list that really feels good is going to change from week to week depending on changes in the meta. That's going to be both local changes and changes across the format as a whole. So this list is going to be a lot different than the one that I posted for the Store Championship in BT10. We made some pretty fundamental changes to the deck. Now, of course, the bulk of the deck is still going to be largely the same, but we've been trying out some new things that have been going really well, so I'm going to share those with you guys in this deck profile. To begin with, we're going to go over our eggs. We are only playing 4, and we are actually back on the Hopmon train. So we used to play Hopmon in some of my earlier lists for Machinedramon. We switched to Pagu for a little while. I've been having a lot of consistency issues with Pagumon, and in the way that this new deck is going to be built, I thought Hopmon was going to be a little bit better for our game plan, so we are back playing for Hopmon. For those of you not aware, Hopmon has an inheritable where on your turn, if you have a Black Tamer in play, the Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. That plus 1000 is going to help us get over a lot of choke points that the format currently has, including but not limited to, of course, Death Xmon. Being able to swing up and into or over a 15,000 DP creature is going to be a big part of the game right now. So we're playing Hopmon to help us with that, and it's pretty helpful for helping to make sure that our level 5s can stay alive on swing as well, as this is a deck that occasionally does want to be getting aggression in with our level 5s. So we are back on playing 4 copies of Hopmon. Now we're going to move on to our rookies, and we do have some changes. The first card has not changed and probably never will change, as we are playing 4 copies of EX1 Hagurumon. Hagurumon is still our best turn 1 / mid-game card filtering, being able to discard any machine or cyborg in order to draw 2. This deck is still full to bursting with various machine and cyborgs, so this card is going to be one of our best setup pieces. Now, one of the new cards that we are going to be playing is 3 copies of Commandramon from BT3. Now, I talked a little bit about this when I did a brief update video after EX3 dropped with the new tech of Sealsdramon in our level 4 slots. Sealsdramon has definitely been performing at the level I was expecting it to, so rather than playing the vanilla Hagurumon that I have historically played in that slot, we are basically lifting straight out and into Commandramon, which really doesn't change anything about the deck. It's still a cyborg and keeps all of those synergies while having that 2 to drop 3000 DP stat line, so it's super nice. But the important part about Commandramon is it has that D-Brigade trait. So when we do our Sealsdramon plays in level 4, basically the extra copy here is going to give us an extra source of rush. As long as it is in our Digivolution sources, our D-Brigade creatures, such as Commandramon here, will then have rush and be able to attack in for free aggression, potentially being able to end the game. The last 3 rookies that we are playing, since we are still only playing 10, is still going to be 3 copies of Chikurimon. Now, these are the slots that I think have been changing the most. Chikurimon is still probably the best thing here, because it's going to help with Blue Flare, which can be a bit rough for Machinedramon, and it's also, of course, still going to keep Death Xmon off the board, which is something that every deck really needs a way to handle or to prevent at this point in the meta. So Chikurimon is still my rookie of choice in that flex slot, since keeping Death Xmon up is going to be definitely a way that we want to go. Now, moving into our level 4s, we are currently playing 4 copies of Guardromon from EX1. This, again, has not changed. I still think Guardromon is probably the best card that this deck has available to it, with that ability, very average stat line for a level 4, having 5 to play, 6000 DP, and 2 to Digivolve. It is a blocker, which is incredibly relevant in a lot of different cases, but its inheritable is still, again, one of the best things this deck has going. Every time you attack, you can trash a Digimon card with Machine or Cyborg in its traits in order to draw 2. This is still card advantage, since you are losing 1, but gaining 2 new cards back to your hand. It's a great way to keep your gas going. It's a great way to load your trash with Cyborgs, and it's still one of, again, my favorite turn 1 / turn 2 plays that this deck is able to put out. Now, we are, as I mentioned, playing 3 copies currently of the new Sealsdramon from EX3. Now this Sealsdramon is definitely worth talking about. It is 5 to play, only has 4000 DP, and is 2 to Digivolve, but has inherent jamming. Now jamming on level 4s I predicted was going to be pretty solid, and so far that ability has absolutely proved itself to be valuable and worthwhile in your level 4 slots. Being able to Digivolve for 2, swing in for pretty much a free check into your opponent's security, and then Digivolve, getting some really nice on Digivolve abilities from your level 5s, is really nice early game aggression and can help things close out later in the game. And as I mentioned with our Commandramons, it does have that inheritable where on your turn, once per turn, when you play another Digimon with D-Brigade in its traits, it gains Rush. So since we are playing Commandramons that only cost 2, there's a very high likelihood we will be able to play that out and get a free attack out of nowhere. Super, super valuable, and again, certainly worth considering if you are looking for some spicy ways to fill your level 4 slots in your own Machinedramon list. Now the last two, we are playing 2 other champions, 2 other level 4s. I'm currently playing 2 copies of Mekanorimon. Now Mekanorimon is a card I've said a lot about in the past, where this card very much kind of has stock that rises and lowers depending on what the rest of the meta looks like. Now I personally think Mekanorimon is in a pretty decent spot right now. There are plenty of go wide decks, as well as, more importantly, a lot of chip damage decks. Think things like D-Brigade, things like Blue Flare. Even things like Bloom Hydra are going to potentially be having lots of small bodies that are trying to get in for early damage. Jesmon, it's a great way to help deal with all the Sistermon aggro. So I do think Mekanori is in a pretty decent spot right now. For those of you unfamiliar, it's 4 to play, 6000 DP, 3 to Digivolve. It does again have Blocker, super nice. Now it cannot attack. However, it is still the only Digimon in the game with the ability where on your opponent's turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon in battle and survives, you can unsuspend it, basically making it an infinite blocker for anything that is 5000 DP or less. So Mekanorimon, I think, is in a pretty good spot. We are currently playing 2 copies of that in our tech spot for level 4. Going up into our level 5s, the lineup is not too different from what I've had in the past. We are still playing 3 copies of MetalTyrannomon. Now, I'm going to hold off on talking too much about BT11 changes because I'm going to be doing a bit of a discussion on that in some videos coming up. But bear in mind that this is currently, and has always been, the only Cyborg I have ever run at 3 copies. Just because it is currently the best / only source of reliable reboot that we have in our level 5 slot, and blocker reboot is still incredibly valuable to have on our stacks. Now, MetalTyrannomon shares a when Digivolving effect with our next 2 cyborgs. We also have Andromon from EX1 and MetalMamemon from EX1, both of which I am currently running 2 copies. Now, MetalTyrannomon and Andromon, of course, have their inheritables for blocker and reboot, but I also want to take a chance to talk a little bit about MetalMamemon. Before we do, of course, we're just going to clarify again those when Digivolving effects, which are even more valuable now than they have ever been. When Digivolving into any of these Digimon, you can reveal your top 3, add any level 6 Digimon card with Machine and its traits among them to your hand, and then trash the rest. This is a deck that is going to even more heavily lean into stack building now that we are in this format with the new Chaosdramon from EX3. So having those when Digivolving effects that can set the trash up super early are even more valuable than ever before. Even beyond that, I actually think the inheritable that MetalMamemon has is also becoming a lot more relevant. So the MetalMamemon has an inheritable where, when attacking, if this Digimon has Machine in its traits, you can delete an opponent's Digimon play cost 5 or less. I think you guys would actually be surprised how often this ability actually does hit things. Being able to spot remove things on attack is super relevant, even more so now that we are no longer playing BT6 or BT7, I think it's BT7, Chaosdramon. Without having that on Digivolve deletion effect, making sure that we are able to remove opponent's Digimon from the board with just a single attack is going to be a lot more important, especially with so many Field Swarm decks running around. It can be helpful for also removing floodgates, as well as other tech cards, like, again, using Jesmon as an example, getting rid of tech Sistermons can be super helpful. So I'm upping MetalMamemon from 1 copy to 2. That's going to give us a total of 7 of these on Digivolve effects, which we are definitely going to want to see. We are also going to be playing still our 1 copy of Megadramon. Now, Megadramon still has that generic blocker inheritable. Again, I don't think this card is going anywhere in the coming sets. I'm also playing a single copy of Cyberdramon from EX3. Now this Cyberdramon, I don't see too many Machinedramon lists running, but if you build a Tamer suit around this card, it is actually a pretty good inheritable. It takes away the need to run both the BT6 Gigadramon and Megadramon by combining their roles into a single card. So Cyberdramon is 6 to play, 7000 DP, 3 to Digivolve, and has an all turns inheritable while you have a suspended Tamer in play, the Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. So being able to have that DP gain on both turns makes your blockers bigger, as well as your attacks larger as well. Having that roll compression is definitely needed when you are already kind of pushed for building unique and valuable stacks as it is. We are still playing our single copy of Volcanomon, having that inherent blocker while in play, as well as generic security attack +1. Definitely nice to see. 9,000 DP is nothing to sniff at either. We are still playing our 2 copies of BT8 MetalGreymon, having that on Digivolve to de-Digivolve an opponent's Digimon and pop something 3,000 DP or less. Still super nice and definitely comes up in more games than you might expect. And of course, one of the best inheritables in the game, even today, being able to attack into your opponent's unsuspended Digimon, giving you pretty uncontested board control if your opponent is choosing not to hide in the raising area. We are also playing a single copy of EX1 MetalGreymon. Now, I've again been very back and forth on this card. I am currently back on it. As I mentioned, this list does change quite a bit, but we're in a spot where I do think that piercing is actually pretty helpful. Again, since we're not packing quite as many deletion effects as we used to with the old Chaosdramon, being able to clear the board while still applying pressure to shields is becoming a little bit more meaningful. So I'm going to be playing a copy of this. Also worth mentioning, of course, that it does still have that when attacking effect where if it swings into security, you can destroy something 4,000 DP or less. Also nice to see. We are still playing our copy of BT1 MetalGreymon for that plus 3,000 DP. Again, I don't think this card is going anywhere. It's still the best at what it does. And our last cyborg for a total of 15 is going to be Megadramon, still from EX1. With that nice on play to pop 2 things, 3,000 DP or less, and again, security attack on the inheritable. Now, I mentioned not wanting to get too deep into talking about BT11, but really the Cyborg lineup is going to be, for me anyways, the big things that are going to be changing once we hit that new format. Specifically, one of the really nice bumps is we will no longer need to run 3 copies of MetalTyrannomon, as we're going to be getting a new Gigadramon with, again, a nice reboot inheritable, while also coming with jamming on its inherent body. So I think Gigadramon is going to be a nice little quality of life update, and there's also going to be a MetalTyrannomon coming out with a nice when digivolving / on play and a good inheritable as well. But again, we're going to get into talking a little bit more about those, but keep your eye on the Cyborg lineup. This is definitely where you're going to see the most variation between different Machinedramon lists. I know my own lineup has changed constantly, even from week to week, but I have been having some success with this particular setup. 15 seemed like a very good number, so this is what you're going to currently be seeing in my deck list for Machinedramon. Speaking of Machinedramon, we are actually bumping down to only 3 copies. Now, this is a first for me. I have always played a full 4 copies of Machinedramon, but I've actually taken one of those cards out because we are now playing a full 4 copies of EX3 Chaosdramon. Now, I'm going to go talking most about the reason for this switch, because this actual swap is one of the biggest reasons that this deck has changed as much as it has. So, EX3 Chaosdramon is 12 to play, 12,000 DP, 4 to Digivolve. It also still has the ability to Digivolve from Machinedramon for a cost of 1. Now, it has an on-play and when Digivolving effect to place up to 3 red or black level 5 cards with Cyborg and their traits onto this card as its bottom sources. Then you can trigger de-Digivolve 1 on one of your opponent's Digimon for each card placed. Now, if you're like me, there was a lot of confusion around exactly how this effect is worded and how it's applied in the game. Basically, you are going to choose one of your opponent's Digimon, and for each card placed, you will de-Digivolve it by 1 stage. So if you place a full 3, you'll choose 1 Digimon, and it will de-Digivolve 3. This cannot be spread in any way. It has 1 target, and will change how many stacks of de-Digivolve are applied based on the number of materials you place. So Chaosdramon is going to be the big reason this deck now looks the way that it does, as I mentioned, because you do not want to be on-playing Chaosdramon. It does not gain you memory back like Machinedramon does. Instead, it mostly benefits from building into it from a stack, since you can basically get a Machinedramon level threat for only 4 memory. As much as I adore EX1 Machinedramon, and we are of course still playing copies of the man himself, unfortunately, paying 7 memory to hardplay Machinedramon is just not as good as it used to be. 7 cost megas are kind of I don't want to say standard. They're definitely not. Like, it's still well below par for what you're getting. The problem is you're passing a lot of memory when you make that play. Unless you're fortunate enough to get up to 4 memory on your turn, you really aren't going to be able to play Machinedramon into a memory tamer super consistently, unless you were, of course, playing off of your own memory tamer at 3, in which case you pass them 4. It's just not necessarily a situation we want to be in all the time. Another one of the big differences we changed to this deck is we're actually not playing the Blitz option anymore. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute because I know that's a big change, so I do want to address it. But basically, the entire deck is now functioning around powering out an early Chaosdramon as quickly as we can. This card is absolutely the same level of threat as Machinedramon and does carry protections. Now, while Machinedramon originally had DP reduction protection as well as the ability to prevent itself from being destroyed, Chaosdramon trades that DP reduction protection for the ability to prevent himself from leaving play by being returned to hand or the deck. So, being able to get bounced by Megadeth, you can prevent that. Cocytus Breath no longer has any effect on this. They can't tuck it, potentially, with things like Hydramon. So, Chaosdramon has very relevant protection in our current meta. That de-Digivolve effect is also super relevant when there are a lot of sticky threats running around. Now, basically, again, the biggest reason for this change is we are able to go into Chaosdramon for only 4 from a stack at the cost of, not being able to play it onto an open board like Machinedramon can. But we are still, of course, playing a 4-3 split. We want to ideally be seeing both in different situations, so we are still playing that. But I am building this deck more around Chaosdramon, which is why we have these current ratios. Now we're going to go ahead and move into our Tamers. We are playing 2 copies of Kiyoshiro. Now again, the big reason that I'm playing Kiyoshiro over something like Hero is because we already have plenty of DP boosts. That's one of the other reasons that we're playing our copies of Hopmon. But Chaosdramon, again, is also going to come with de-Digivolve 3, so the need to actually swing over massive threats outside of specifically Death Xmon is not quite as relevant as it used to be. Now, the other thing that is still going to be super relevant is card draw, being able to churn through our deck as fast as possible, which is why I've opted for 2 copies of Kiyoshiro to help us get that extra card draw in the mid to late game, which has definitely proven worthwhile. We are still playing 3 copies of Kazu, down from 4. Kazu is still an incredible card for this deck, but I am actually making room for a single copy of Izzy and Joe. Now, Izzy and Joe is another card, again, that has been in and out. You're seeing lots of tech cards you've probably heard me talk about before. Izzy Joe is kind of nice because it helps to kind of bottleneck the way that your opponent is trying to play the game. They basically have to play around this card or you're going to get lots of free memory on your turn, and they're definitely not going to want that. So since we are still wanting to only play 2 copies of a memory setter, which is the ratio that I personally like, we got 3 copies of Kazu to give us 1 memory per turn and a copy of Izzy Joe to give us another 2 memory per turn. Ideally, we want to try to get above 3 if possible, but that's going to be one of our easiest ways of doing that. So Izzy Joe is my current extra tamer of choice. Once BT11 rolls around, even though I am not super high on Analog Man, I do expect to be swapping this Izzy Joe out for a single copy, at least, of Analog Man once that card enters the format. I do think even though Analog Man may not be super ideal, outside of being able to be tucked by the new Machinedramon, which again I am not super high on, the in-play effect to redirect attacks is extremely relevant. So we are going to be playing at least 1 copy of Analog Man when that comes out, and I think this is a great spot for it. And lastly, the final 3 cards in our deck, we are no longer playing the Blitz option. We are instead playing 3 copies of Ultimate Connection. Now, I actually have this change thanks to a new member of our Discord named, he has his own channel called Let's Go Pokemon, and he and I are hopefully going to be doing some collabs in the future. He's expressed some interest, and I would be super excited to do some discussion on the Machinedramon archetype. No promises there. Of course, he is free to, take the offer or decline at his will. However, I will say he has given me a lot of really cool insight into this deck archetype through the Discord, sharing a couple of different lists that he's seen from overseas. One particular list that really got my juices running, again, cut all their copies of the Blitz option and was more going towards the Ultimate Connection route, and it took me a second, but I understood why. Since this is a deck that is trying to, again, more aggressively go into Chaosdramon, Chaosdramon is 4 to Digivolve, so as long as we have a memory setter in play, we're going to start at 3. Ultimate Connection, Izzy Joe, and Kazu are going to get us up to 4 and above. Basically, the idea is we want to be able to Digivolve into Chaosdramon without passing turn. So as long as we can get a level 5 in play with 3 memory, we can go into Chaosdramon and then prioritize on the de-Digivolve immediately before the opponent has a chance to recover. This deck ultimately winds up being a lot more aggressive as a result. Now, obviously, there are some downsides. The Blitz option is an incredibly powerful card and still absolutely could come in and out of the build as time progresses. But one of the other big problems I've started to have with the Blitz option is just how taxing it is on resources in your hand. In order to play the Blitz option card, Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon, you have to play the option itself, which is one card. You need to have Machinedramon in your hand, which is a second card, and you have to discard a third card just to activate it. So right off the bat, before you have even tucked any cyborgs under your Machinedramon, you have already had to lose 3 cards in your hand, and that is a massive, massive tax on your card advantage. Now, there are ways to recuperate that card advantage, but losing 3 cards for that play is unfortunately a very steep cost, especially if your opponent can handle the Machinedramon right away through either bounce effects or other things of that nature. Machinedramon can still be hard played without having the Blitz, and it can still do its job perfectly fine. It's still going to be a very powerful wall if you give it blocker. It's still very sticky and can be difficult to remove, but you can do all of that without needing to drop basically your entire hand in order to make that play. Ultimate Connection, by comparison, is still card disadvantage, but you're only losing 1 card. Because you have to play the Ultimate Connection, you have to discard a second card, and then you'll get to draw a new card back. So rather than losing a total of 2 or 3 cards from your hand, you're only losing 1. That does matter. It's also going to be an extra source of card draw, so rather than discarding a bunch, it'll help you dig through your deck a little faster. And of course, the memory gain of gaining 2 is going to help you make plays without having to pass turn. We do have quite a few 4-cost Digivolutions. Not only do we have Chaosdramon, we have our MetalGreymons from BT8, we have our Volcanomons from the structure deck. Digivolving into those without passing turn can be super helpful as well, especially if we need to go straight from our level 4s up into our Chaosdramons. But yeah, that's going to about do it for this deck list, guys. I know this has been a big departure from other Machinedramon lists that I have posted in the past, but hopefully I've done at least a moderately good job of explaining why we have made those changes. I have been seeing some pretty decent success with this new list. It's just a new way of just kind of trying to mix things up. I've said it a lot before. This deck is anything but solved. There is still so much room for innovation, and honestly, I want you guys to find a list that does better than mine. I would love to see you guys having success with the same deck that I have grown to love so much, and I hope you guys will leave comments and suggestions down below so we can continue the discussion and really try to figure out where this deck is going moving forward. We've got a lot of things to look forward to, not only in BT11, but also BT12, and even the couple of more sets after that. I'm super excited, of course, for Chaosdramon X, but we'll save that discussion for another video. With that, guys, I'm an avid herpetologist. Thank you all so much for joining. If you're continuing to enjoy the content, feel free to like and subscribe, and yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I will see you all next time.